Now, we are pleased now to be joined by Bernard Kerik, a former New York City Police Commissioner, someone who worked very closely with Rudy Giuliani. He's also the former interim Minister for the Interior of Iraq and is also a senior policy advisor to the U.S. President George W. Bush as the Iraq War first began. Bernard, it's great to have you with us, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we heard Mayor Giuliani say something that a lot of folks have talked about, but really has not been the main focus of a lot of the discussion that comes up when you're talking about race in the police force, and that is black-on-black violence. What was your response when you heard Rudy Giuliani going back and forth with Dyson about this issue?
You know what, John? It is what it is. I mean, you can't erase those statistics. We saw it in New York. We see it around the country. I think the political correctness in the world today, or in the U.S., it pushes people not to talk about it, pushes people not to admit it, not to agree with it. You know, they want to focus on something else. And I noticed something when you started out your presentation earlier. The activists are going to, you know, respond. They're going to do what they're doing. Whether this guy is indicted or not, you have to wonder what people's real motives are behind these protests.
And what do you think their real motives are then? We've heard somebody like Al Sharpton say that he's going to be there no matter what the grand jury decides. Most folks, at least from what I've seen, say it's going to be a no bill or no charges against Officer Wilson. That might be what Sharpton wants, but what do you think their real motives are aside from what's taking place in Ferguson?
Well, look, Al Sharpton is an opportunist. You know, he takes advantage of situations like this. He gets involved in situations like this. The bottom line is we live by a set of laws, the Constitution, that we're supposed to follow. You know, I find it amazing. I had to debate Jesse Jackson one time, and he basically came out and said this guy should be put in prison. This cop should be put in prison, basically, arrested, charged, put in prison before the investigation, before the grand jury, before anything. This is a guy that wanted to be the president of the United States. You know what? We have a set of laws to follow. Follow the law. Let due course take its process, go through the process, and let's find out what the real evidence is. Nobody knows. All these people talking, nobody knows what the evidence is, with the exception of the people that's sitting in that grand jury and the prosecutor.
And let's talk about that a little bit too, Bernie, because that was another point that Mayor Giuliani made yesterday, a former federal prosecutor. These grand jury deliberations are supposed to be highly secretive. Of course, there's been leaks out to the media, and we've seen folks like Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson kind of apply pressure through the media on the grand jury. What do you think? This is taking on a life of its own. How disappointing is that for you as someone who's very familiar with law enforcement?
Well, it's disappointing on a number of fronts. One, first of which, is the leaks out of the grand jury. The only people that know what's going on in there are the prosecutors. So that stuff should not be leaked out to the public, number one. Number two, Al Sharpton and all these people out there protesting and making these public statements and threatening, you know, some kind of civil disobedience. You know what? That is influencing, could influence the process, could influence the grand jury process. And it's wrong. It's just wrong. The evidence is what it is. Let the people in the grand jury see the evidence, analyze the evidence, evaluate the evidence, and make a decision. That's what's supposed to happen. But today in this country, that's not what happens.
It certainly doesn't appear.
And the leaks are outrageous.
Those leaks are outrageous and concerning. We'll see what happens. We're keeping one eye on Ferguson. We also want to talk to you, Bernard, a little bit about what's taking place in Iraq right now. We're about to step aside for a short commercial break, but Bernard Kerik, former New York City Police Commissioner, also former U.S. envoy to Iraq, will be back with us right after this short commercial break. John Bachman in for JD today. Stick around, please. And back with us to talk more about this, and also going to talk about Iraq in a second, is Bernard Kerik, the former police commissioner of New York. And Bernie, we wanted to ask one more question about Ferguson as we wait for that grand jury report before we get to Iraq. And that is, we've heard a lot about the National Guard being activated, the governor of Missouri, Jay Nixon, putting certain things into place, the FBI supposedly being involved somehow, the president leaving the door open and maybe visiting there. What do you think about the response thus far, kind of sending a message to the folks in Ferguson that they have this under control? Or trying to anyway.
Well, I think it's really up to the governor and the state police to, ensure there's safety and security. The first couple days of this thing did not go well for them. I think the governor's trying to be proactive and preemptive. He has the right to call in the National Guard if he deems necessary, if he thinks the local and state authorities can't handle it. And hopefully that won't be the case.
Are these the same types of moves you would have made if you were in his shoes?
Well, I don't have all the information he does, but I think he's doing the right thing. He has to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's move on and talk about Iraq a little bit. Of course, we heard about more fighting over the weekend, a fierce battle between ISIS militants and the Iraqi military and tribal forces close to the main government complex in the center of Ramadi, a capital city there in one of the provinces. We're told that the battle is happening about 1,000 feet from that complex. It houses regional and government security forces. Let's talk about the strategic importance of what's taking place right now and the ability of the Iraqi military to perhaps regain and capture control of Ramadi.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think it's extremely important that we stay as involved as we possibly can to give these guys the confidence they need to do what they have to do. And I think that's a big problem here. The Iraqi national security forces, they don't have confidence. They've lost a number of battles. They've come close to losing their entire country. And I think at this point, the Americans, I think the president's move to send people in, this 1,500 soldiers over the last several weeks, the advisors, I think that was a good move. Maybe more to come, but I think we have to stay as active as possible to give these guys the confidence they need to do what they have to do.
Well, I've just been handed a report and a couple things that were in the New York Times today, this being one of another thing I want to talk to you too, and that is that Hagel is said to be stepping down as defense chief under pressure, just handed to me a few moments ago. Bernard, this is obviously a big deal here, and I wanted to get your response to this report from the New York Times does turn out to be true.
Well, that's the first I've heard of it. It's going to be interesting to see who moves up into that spot. The bottom line is, though, John, the military commanders on the ground know what they're doing. These are the guys we should be listening to. These are the guys we should be following. The Secretary of Defense is one of the most important positions in this country, but we have some phenomenal people in the leadership in the military right now. Ray Odierno and some of the others. I think we'll be okay, but it'll be interesting to see who they replace Nagel with.
Yeah, Ray Odierno's name comes up for a lot of these jobs. Also, a guy talked about when they were looking for somebody to run the VA Medical Center as well. Obviously, a guy who has a lot of respect, and apparently this announcement is going to come later today in a Rose Garden appearance at the White House. President Obama expected to announce the resignation of Chuck Hagel as his defense chief. We'll see what follows from that. But I also want to talk about another article that was in the New York Times today with you, Bernard Kerik, and the headline is Graft Hobbles Iraq's Military Fighting ISIS. One Iraqi general is known as the chicken guy because of his reputation for selling his soldiers poultry provisions. Another guy, Iraq guy, for his habit of enjoying anise-flavored liquor on the job. Another guy is called General Deftar for his infamous selling of officer commissions. This is some of the stuff that takes place in the Iraqi military. Corruption is what the article alleges. Is there any possible way that we can really have a real partner with the Iraqi military when this type of corruption, and you've seen it in the Iraqi military, is so pervasive?
You know what, John? One of the biggest problems we have, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places around the world, are these kind of corruption issues. And we have to try to lead by example in those areas. You're going to have these problems. It's a different mindset, a different culture. They operate very differently in these other countries. They don't have the same oversights, the same.
And it is what they are trying to.
The same inquiries and investigations.
It is definitely a different situation, Bernie. We'll have to leave it there. And what the Obama administration is trying to navigate right now, trying to bolster the Iraqi military. Bernard Kerik, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, John.
All right, Grover Norquist is back with us. We're going to talk about some of these issues, how the GOP can stop President Obama after this.